All set, councilors? Our microphones are on, and we're ready to go. Here we are this evening at the City Council's Ordinance Committee, a meeting scheduled for this evening, June 2nd, 2021. It's about 6:30, 8 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. And just so everyone is aware, this meeting is being held in accordance with Governor Charlie Baker's signed open meeting law order dated May 12, 2020, which relieves a public body from the requirement of Section 20 of Chapter 38 that it conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, provided that the public body makes provisions to ensure public access to the deliberations of the public body for interested members of the public through adequate alternative means. The City Council members, staff, and certain invited guests with matters on the agenda will attend the meeting in person in council chambers. Out of respect to the public health in response to the governor's declared the state of emergency, this meeting will be closed to the public, and interested parties can instead access deliberations via a live stream nationally from www.youtube.com/user.TheBrocktonChannels live. So again, this is in accordance with that rule that's been in place since March of 2020. Let's hope that probably in the next few months that some of this will start to also diminish itself as we continue to move forward and come out of the pandemic that we've been in for the last 18 months. Councilors, we have a few items on the agenda this evening. This evening, as you know, is not in any way such, because it was out on email for whatever, there is no public hearing. It's a usual City Council Ordinance Committee meeting where ordinance has been brought to our attention by City Councilors to be discussed and to move forward back to the full council. At this time, I'm going to take item number 3, and I'm just going to read it into, if I could, just read it into the record at this point. And then Councilor Farrell, who has brought this before us, the President of the Council wishes to speak just briefly on it, so I'm going to allow that to happen. So an ordinance amending Article 2, Section 1.004 of the revised ordinances of the City of Brockton, be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows. Section 1.004, regulations of marijuana sales, is amended by adding the following sections where appropriate. A, there shall be no more than 2 licenses issued for the delivery of marijuana products pursuant to regulations promulgated by the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. Priority shall be given to an applicant for a license to deliver marijuana products who currently holds a license for the conduct of marijuana businesses within the City of Brockton. There shall be a moratorium on the issuance of any license to allow social consumption of marijuana for a period of 2 years from the date of the adoption of this ordinance. At this time, I'm going to ask Councilor Farrell, you wanted to speak in regards to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Ordinance Committee. I'm going to ask that you table this ordinance. Number one, we received a number of emails which were kind of thought-provoking, and because of those emails, I had a conversation with the city solicitor this afternoon for quite some time. The original intent of this ordinance was to give preference to a marijuana licensee already here in Brockton who might want to morph into delivery. I can't do that because once the Cannabis Control Commission issues a delivery license, let's say to someone in Taunton, they can come into Brockton and deliver. So we could literally have licensees from a number of different communities come into Brockton, so this ordinance is really moot. I also found out, and you might want to ask the solicitor to expand on it a little bit, there are different classifications of delivery. There are 2 classifications. What was suggested to me by the solicitor, and I agree with it, is that we might want to look at zoning. Where do we want delivery to be located? What hours of operation would we want those delivery places to have for their business operations? And I don't think we have anything on the books right now in zoning specific to delivery licensees. And lastly, quite frankly, folks, under the current law, the mayor is going to control what happens. If he doesn't issue an HCA for delivery, you're not going to have a license issued in Brockton. You might have some people from outside the community delivering, but it's really the mayor's executive decision as to whether he wants to issue an HCA for delivery, and I might add for any other type of marijuana establishment. Now, the second portion of this ordinance, and I was reminded by Councilor Nicastro, involves social consumption. You know, it's an evolving industry. I don't know where it's going. If a councilor feels strongly that we should have a moratorium on social consumption, then I would put through an order, as we did with retail for a while, and I think we can do it through an order unless legislative council indicates otherwise. But I'm satisfied now, based on the comments that came into me, the conversation with the solicitor. You know, let's let this industry get on its feet. Let's see where it's going to go, and then I think we'll be in a much more well-informed position to decide what restrictions, if any, we want to put on the businesses. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. So I would ask someone to,
I have a question. I mean, I have an issue.
before we make a, you want a question before we make a motion?
Yeah.
Councilor Rodriguez has a question. Councilor Fowle?
No, actually, I think I was going to address my question to our
Okay.
Attorney Resnick in
Yep.
terms of,
Attorney Resnick?
and I agree with Council Falwell in terms of, you know, not limiting the number of delivery licenses, because we can't control what goes on in our surrounding anyway. So we could have, you know, we limit 2 to Brockton, and yet Avon could have 7. So it doesn't really do us any good in terms of, you know, it's cutting the old nose to, you know, to do what to the face. But in B, I believe, so you're saying that we shouldn't have an ordinance, or we should have some sort of an order? Because I believe strongly about putting a limitation on this particular issue in terms of moratorium in the sense of consumption in the city, because in doing some work and research around the community, there's basically no taste for this particular extension of the marijuana business in this community. And I think we need to do our, you know, representation of the population that basically are anti this particular thing in order for us to put something in the books, because frankly, I'm telling you, based on what the way the state operates, there could be some sort of a pilot program in the city within, you know, 6-7 months or so, and we lose that kind of ability in a way. So I need to figure out exactly, you know, before we remove this entire order out of here, whether or not we can strike A out of the order and leave B in place.
So I believe we did the last one by order, and we acted upon it in a single night when we did the moratorium on retail licenses, while we took the time to draft it, and that held up fine. If you want to, you could cross that off and act only on that moratorium. But the social consumption, and as I understand it, is an opt-in program. So unlike the retail and the delivery where the state's just going to grant them, from what I understand, the social consumption, the town, it would take a significant amount of effort and coordinating with the city, saying we would like to volunteer our city as a pilot program, as opposed to the state requiring us to participate in that program.
But I think if we have some sort of a signage in place that says, look, we're not even going to entertain this discussion because we have an order in the book that says we're not even going to look at this particular thing, because I frankly, I don't see myself ever voting for something like this in our city. But I think as responsible councils that we should have something in the books that basically dictates right off the bat that we're not even going to entertain this kind of at least as long as I'm on this body, in the sense, and I have a say on this particular thing. I think that's not something that we should actually have, but I think we should have something in place just in case something comes down the pipeline where the state wants to try, you know, because we are a marijuana community in the middle of all these other communities that say no, that there's something in there to protect us so that we don't get stuck with this particular thing.
Yep, so then all you would need to do is just make a motion to strike
So that's what
A.
I mean, instead of just striking the whole ordinance, I'd like to make a motion that we strike A in its entirety and just leave B in place so we can move forward with this particular thing.
I will add that So the moratorium aspect of it was challenged, and there was a lot of pushback whether or not municipalities had the authority to do that, but we were fine doing the moratorium on the retail side. And I think because this is more of an opt-in, rather than an opt-out, I guess, I think you should be fine. But it could be challenged. I don't see that it will.
Well, let it be challenged, but, but I think we have to speak up and stand up for what we believe in, and that's the way I feel about it.
How did, Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney Resnick, do we have any understanding of what the opt-in process is?
Attorney Bridges might have a little bit more information on this than I do. It's in such an infancy stage because right now the state's, the CCC's attention is moving to the delivery side. But it's like a pilot program that they would reach out to communities that were interested and really work with the communities to develop what that would look like. But Attorney Bridges may have a little bit more on that.
Good
Attorney?
evening. Hi. Everything that your legislative counsel so far has told you, I would say is accurate and correct. I would just add that smoking indoors is not allowed in Massachusetts, whether it's cannabis or tobacco. If you're in a public place, you cannot smoke marijuana, just like you cannot smoke a cigarette at a restaurant or at a club, if you will, or at a bar, anywhere. So there's like this twofold issue that's occurring, is that Massachusetts is grappling with public smoking, period. Forget the cannabis aspect, and how social consumption would fit into that framework. So there's a pilot program that the CCC is operating for and some communities have chosen to opt in. We want to try what are being sort of called pot cafes, social consumption, venues. The city of Brockton did not participate in that pilot program. It has, as I stand here tonight, no desire to participate in that pilot program. But irregardless of the pilot program, there was still the need to deal with the smoking aspect. So, moratorium or not, pot cafes are not coming until you opt in. Forget the pilot program.
So you think that the opt-in will be regardless of whether it's a pilot program or not?
That is the way the law is currently written.
And how did the people who did opt into the pilot program, what was that process?
I do not know because we did not, engage in it, other than I reviewed the application materials, and essentially, to your legislative counsel's point, that the focus really has been on delivery, and obviously coronavirus still occurring in 2020, and that's when delivery rolled out, and that's when they made a commitment to deal with social consumption, the CCC being they. The focus has been on delivery, and the pilot program just got underway at the end of last year.
But that pilot program, whoever opted in would have had to have overcome that second issue of smoking indoors,
Well,
correct?
it's not permanence. So I think that is how they're dealing with it. That's why it's a pilot, because it's not permanent. So it was communities that I would suspect also worked with their local boards of health or their health commission or whatever they have on this issue. And they have not, the state legislator would have to change the law for social consumption to be allowed on a permanent basis outside of the cannabis law.
Okay. Then just my only comment on the issue would be from what was just explained was that this seems to kind of track item A, where we don't know enough at this point of what the process is going to be, what this industry is going to, be about. My position would be, I understand that there may be, some pushback from the citizenry regarding these types of shops, but I think before we put a moratorium, or I would vote for a moratorium, is to have a better understanding of what the actual process is. If there is an opt-in, then I would want to see what that opt-in is, and then see if there's any political will to exercise that opt-in, and not take the choice away from the city if we so choose. So that's really my position.
Thank you, Councilman Castro.
Thank you. Come back up, Solicitor Bridges, please. Thank you for being here. Good evening.
Hi.
I'm piggybacking off Councilor Thompson's comments. I'm also interested to know what kind of an overt act is required to opt in. If it's something we have to do before we would consider taking applications for social consumption locations, or if it's as simple as we just start taking them.
No, there does not exist currently a legal mechanism to allow for what I'm calling the pot cafes, as in a dedicated space like a hookah lounge. That does not exist. 94G is the marijuana law. I don't know the citation for the lack of being able to smoke in public places. I can't give you the citation. That citation is not specific to tobacco. So there would have to be a change in the state law in order for communities to be able to opt in. 94G was written such that communities had the choice to opt in for public consumption, social consumption, the cafe model. It was written to opt in instead of being, it was written such that you have to opt in instead of opt out, as the rest of the legislation was written, because they still have to deal with this issue that you cannot smoke in public regardless of the matter that you're smoking. While you're considering it, I would just offer an equity piece that not everybody who wishes to legally consume marijuana can do so in their home. And I'm not suggesting to you that you should or should not do cafes. I'm just offering this point of consideration for you that folks who, live in subsidized housing, or folks who, don't necessarily have access to stable housing or the like, or maybe they do, but their landlord forbids it even though it's legal. That is sort of one thing that the cafes provide in terms of equity. But you can't do it right now, or anytime in the future, near future.
Okay. I would respectfully suggest from my own observation that not everyone has a car, but as I drive around the city on a daily basis, a lot of people who may not be able to consume in their homes are using their cars that way.
That may be true.
Yeah.
That may be true. And driving under the influence is still illegal?
Yes.
Cannabis or alcohol?
But there's no test for it.
Correct.
Yes. So it's at 6s and 7s right now, but at some point, hopefully, it will all be addressed. I just don't want someone to be harmed in the meantime.
Well, the good news is they cannot open, whether we opt in or not. We're not part of the pilot program. That is the only avenue for public consumption at the moment. They're testing it out to see what it will look like, is sort of my, hypothesis of it. But in order to actually ever be able to opt in, there has to be a change in the law that forbid public smoking. And everyone is aware of this problem that's working in the space. And that is partly why it's taking quite a while. And the focus isn't on the regulations for social consumption, because it will not be happening anytime soon, until the legislative body of Massachusetts makes a change.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
unless it's a private
Thank you,
club,
Counsel.
right?
I would still, that is a very good point, that our ordinances should be specific if that is the intent of the council regarding consumption in private spaces. That's an excellent point.
I just want to,
Council Monahan, anything to say? Or? No, you're good? Back to Council Rodriguez.
well, Attorney Bridges, who decided, or who decides on, from the city standpoint, that option to yes or no in the pilot program, yes or no on the opt-in and no opt-in out?
On the yes or no opt-in, I would, to have to review the law, but
I'm saying who speaks for the city, basically.
no one has spoken for the city, but I would suggest it would be the legislative body without reviewing the law, just speaking off the cuff, in terms of the opt-in, just like there was just a local legislative role in limiting the number of marijuana establishments and then increasing the number of marijuana establishments. On the pilot program, I don't think anyone necessarily made a decision but I'm just not aware of anyone that applied to be a part of it.
Well, see, this is the fear that I actually have, is the fact that we do have smoke shops all over the place where people smoke cigars.
Indoors,
Yeah,
other than the private club?
they smoke cigars.
Smoking indoors is, we should maybe invite the Board of Health, but they've taken a stance on it, and the law has taken a stance on it.
Yeah, there's cigar shops all over the place, and people do smoke indoors. I've been invited to a few of those. I don't smoke, but I've been invited to things like that. So again, this brings me back to this whole thing with marijuana, in terms of putting something just to kind of put the brakes on and say, at least from this aspect, in terms of public consumption of marijuana or marijuana products, at least I'd feel comfortable if we have some things in a sense of a break, because the fear that I have is a year from now and 2 years from now, something, you never know, administrations change, the will of the council might change, but at least if there's some things in there that kind of holds back at least this aspect of things, it makes me feel better. It makes a lot of people in this community feel better. And that's why it doesn't matter how it goes here, I'm going to vote for something in the books that basically say there's going to be a moratorium to make sure that there's a pause when it comes to dealing with this particular thing until we're basically sure about that. Because my fear is that we in this city, we usually get stuck with whatever the state doesn't want. It ends up here. It happens with projects. It happens with a variety of other things. So if they want to try something new, usually somebody will flash a few dollars in our direction, and because we're dying for dollars and cents, we tend to okay and say, yes, we'll try some things out. So I'd feel better if we have something in the books that basically kind of pauses that whole thing. Thank you.
Well, out of respect to Councilor Fowler, who put this before us, I'd like to hear again, Councilor Fowler, what your opinion is to some of the discussion that's gone on, with this.
Unless legislative council disagrees, I think the issue that Councilor Rodriguez raised is a very valid one, that you might want to pause everything, take a look at zoning, collaborate with the Board of Health, assimilate more information so we know what we're doing, but I think you can do it through an order. I don't think you have to go through this ordinance process to accomplish that pause, that temporary, shall we say, we're not going to entertain any licenses, even if the state law on smoking inside changes.
For 2 years, that covers it.
But
Okay.
I wouldn't presume to supplant the wisdom of this group. It's
Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to find out,
If you have an ordinance that has like a sunset clause, it's applicable for 2 years, it's going to have the same effect as an order than an ordinance. The only reason why we did it as an order before was because we were acting on it that night as we were submitting it. So if you want to do it by an ordinance, you can do it now.
And this is one step closer to get it done, because once it goes through here, and then it goes through the whole council, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, it would need to go to the full city council, have another reading, and then that'd probably bring you in July sometime for a final vote on it. That's a will of the council type response.
Are you looking, Councilor Castro, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, it's June. It's our month where we're, not meeting regularly and all that. And while I understand working with what we have here, we can probably get an order passed faster.
How?
Since we don't have to go through all those readings.
I think through the chair, I think it'll be the same exact thing. Because if you have an order in the council, it's going to get referred to committee,
Yeah, but we
and then
can
it's going to go
suspend-
back to the council, so this would be the 2 readings that we need.
We can suspend the rules and act on it, though.
I know, but what I'm saying, we already have something that's already submitted, that if we can strike the piece that we all agree shouldn't be in there, then vote on the piece that we feel that should be in there and move it forward in the council.
I hear you, but we can probably get this done by the end of the month as an order. I'm not sure we can get an ordinance done by the end of the month.
You don't have to have the 3 readings.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
On this?
For what it's worth, because it's an opt-in program and Brockton's not going to opt in within the next month, I don't think it's something you need to have done before July. But this will get reported back. Oh, no, so it would get reported back for a reading on the 14th of June, and then you have another meeting on June 28th. So it would be that meeting.
Do we?
But we can,
So it's the same difference,
Yeah.
you're saying? Okay.
Oh, we're in a summer session.
So what's your,
So
I
we're
made
in
a mo-
summer session.
did you make one?
I made a motion that we strike A in its entirety and leave B as is to be presented to the entire body for a vote.
Okay, so motion's been made that we're striking A, and that we're going to leave B so that it can go back to the full city council, is that right? So, do you have a second on it, or?
These would be two separate votes, right?
No, we're amending the order.
One to amend and then one on the amendment.
Well, yeah,
Correct.
correct, yeah. You're
The motion to
amending it.
amend, if that carries, someone would make a motion favorably.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so motion to amend the order by striking A in its entirety and making B the A.
Yep. It'll fall, the order of it will fall as the next name alphabetical designation in that section, but yes.
okay, so you made a motion to amend the order by striking A. Has there been a second to that?
Counselor Monahan seconded.
You made a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so motion's been made in second of doing that, all in,
On the motion.
on the motion.
Okay. I have in my calendar that our meeting on June 14th is a special city council meeting. And isn't that strictly to approve the budget? Do we have an agenda beyond that?
No, we can't. It's a regular,
Right.
Yeah.
And so that would be our sole agenda item. And so our regular meeting would be on the 28th.
The 28th,
So we would only have one council meeting in June,
right.
which means we wouldn't get an ordinance done by the end of the month.
would it be on the agenda in June for the second reading, or?
Usually not. Usually a special meeting is limited to its intended
Oh, no, I
purpose.
mean, that's going to be the end for the month.
Yeah, so you're, on the 28th, the question will be on passage to a third reading, and then,
20th of June.
yeah,
I think we can get it done by July, so it gets done by July, it's done by July,
yeah.
Okay?
you know?
But we can vote to not go to a third reading and vote on it that night, though, right?
Yes, you can, there is a provision that you can
If you want
pass
to
an
do
item
that.
all in one night. I wouldn't suggest it for something like this.
Yeah,
It's a moratorium that could be subject to a challenge.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should,
all right, whatever.
So the
We've done
first
July.
meeting in July will take care of it.
yeah.
Okay, so, everyone understands that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, now again, motion was made and seconded, so vote on the amendment of this order. All in
Wait, to
favor?
amend.
To amend,
This, okay.
yeah, to amend. All in favor? Opposed? So the order has been amended. Now we need a,
Motion to recommend favorably as amended.
as amended.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? So be. So it goes back to the city council that way, okay?
Cool.
Next item. We go back to item number 1. Thank you, Councilor Fowle, and thank you, City Solicitor as well. And this item was one item that was postponed at our last meeting, and it's an ordinance amending Section 2-181 of the revised ordinances of the City of Brockton. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows. Section 2-181 is repealed in its entirety, and in its place the following is inserted. The city solicitor shall be an active attorney at law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, properly licensed and in good standing with the Massachusetts Bar Association. He or she shall have a minimum of 5 years of experience in the practice of law in Massachusetts with a thorough knowledge of Massachusetts general laws, including municipal law. He or she shall have demonstrated trial experience, including the research, preparation, and management of civil or criminal cases during the various stages of litigation. The provisions of Section 2-110 of the revised ordinances shall not apply to this position. However, where 2 or more candidates have equal qualifications and experience, as determined by the mayor, preference shall be given to a resident of the city or a candidate willing to move into the city within 1 year of appointment. And again, it was postponed in our May's meeting. So invited guest on this again is City Council President, Council Winthrop Fowl, and our City Solicitor, Attorney Bridges. Counselor.
Let me say, Mr. Chairman, that's the last time I'm going to recommend you table something because it took longer to table it and thrash it out than I anticipated.
That's all right. We like having you here.
You know, the city solicitor's position is very interesting. It's the chief legal officer of the city. You basically run a law firm because you have a number of assistant city solicitors. But in our charter, that person is selected by the mayor, and there is absolutely no term of office. Unlike, for example, the planning board or the city auditor or the Director of Planning and Economic Development, absolutely no term of office. In addition, unlike other department heads that are not covered by the union where some department heads are located, you don't have, if the mayor were to remove you from your city solicitor position, you don't have the right to appeal to the city council, which the auditor does, the human resources director, and some others. The other interesting thing is that under our ordinances currently, here are the only qualifications for the city solicitor. Section 2-181, the city solicitor shall be a resident of the city and an attorney at law in the courts of the Commonwealth. No minimum qualifications, no outline of any knowledge, skills, and abilities that we would prefer that our city solicitor have. And lastly, it's the only position in the law department covered by residency. The council, prior to my service, and maybe prior to several people here, exempted assistant city solicitors from residency. So the only person who has no defined term of office, serves at the whim of the mayor, has to have established a residency within a year of appointment, and has no right of appeal to the council if they're removed as a solicitor. And I just think it's time for that to change. Now, all of my remarks have nothing to do with Solicitor Bridges. What I'm looking is ahead to when, unfortunately, Solicitor Bridges isn't here, the administration changes, we're going to have to recruit a chief legal officer, a city solicitor. And if we're going to attract the best and the brightest, and we're going to bring someone in who knows civil law, criminal law, collective bargaining, how to practice in both the federal and state courts, and yes, you do have outside counsel you can employ, but let's remember the ultimate responsibility for how this city handles its legal affairs rests with the city solicitor. Just because you hire an outside counsel doesn't mean you wash your hands of that issue and walk away. So I've offered this ordinance. I do know there is a technical amendment that has to be made because I think it was Councilor Nicastro that pointed out to me that one of my qualifications was improperly worded, and I would ask that she or someone else step up and make that amendment. But I would hope that you would take a look at this. If someone has an amendment that would strengthen it, if someone has a way of making sure that we identify the city solicitor as a very prominent part of city government. The decisions that that person, he or she makes, can have profound implications for the city in terms of financial settlements, the protection of our employees, protection of our environment in the city, defending us against suits for zoning, alleged zoning laws that are improper. And I just think, and I'm sure Solicitor Bridges can expand a little bit on what she does every day, I just think this cries out for attention. And I hope you'll give it that attention. And again, if any of the 5 of you have some suggestions for improving this ordinance, I hope you will do that. I did add in something that is related to residency, and that is, if we have a pool of candidates, and there are 3 or 4, and one of them, and they're basically all equal in terms of knowledge, skills, ability, education, experience, and one of them is a city resident, by all means, that person should have preference. By all means, we should help someone who is already a part of the city.
Right.
Now, the caveat is that if you pick an attorney from inside the city and they have a very large client base from within the city, it might put them at odds if there are issues that come up involving past clients. But obviously, the integrity of that person would call for him or her to step aside and turf it out to one of the assistant city solicitors and stay out of it. But clearly, preference should be given to someone who is qualified, equally qualified among all the candidates who comes from Brockton. I think that's a given. That might even be a template for changing our current residency ordinance if there were a will to do that. But with that, I would be glad to answer any questions, but I would respectfully suggest you consult with Attorney Bridges here tonight, because she's there day by day. She knows everything that goes on and all of the demands on her intellect and her time trying to handle all the legal issues that come in before the city.
I agree. Matter of fact, why don't we, if the attorney's willing, we could have you come up and give us your thoughts and theories, because I think it's something that's well overdue, to be truthful with you, and I think, the council spoke very much in the way that I probably would have said some of the things that, in any time, things can change, and with another administration, things can change. Things are changing daily, as you know that, in the world in itself. So it's something that we need to really take a hard look at and start to, figure out just what the future is going to look like, in that department. And so you do a great job, so I know you're ready to take on the task and explain it to us.
I love the job.
I know you do.
And I appreciate, the thought over the department and the consideration that you all did in expanding the department. I'm still looking for folks. But, I think Councilor Farwell's comments really summarized it very fairly, the complicatedness of the office. And then to sort of offer an example, Taunton, which is not a comparable city in all variables or aspects, but in some it certainly is. They have a solicitor there who has a law firm, because their city is a little bit smaller, but their solicitors and assistants are employed by contract. And it is, I could provide you a copy of it, the public documents are on their law department's webpage. The only thing that I think is really necessary to remind everyone is that there is a statute that coincides with our ordinance or in our charter on department heads, specifically under Plan B communities. So the section is the chapter is 43 and the section is 60. And it's the same language that's in our charter over the confirmation of department heads, and specifically that everybody gets confirmed essentially, except for the solicitor for the most part, based on appointment and removal. And so that is sort of the law on the subject. What I don't see there is any prohibition against a contract or some type of appointment by the administration that is not subject to confirmation. That is really the restriction of the law, that the administration should be able to bring their own legal team if they so desire. And so a contract would be restricted to the term of office, I would suggest, as the current administration. That was a lot of words. It's a complicated thing. But the mayor has the sole authority over your employment in the city. But I work for the city. I represent the city. So Taunton has two-year contracts for their folks, and after the first 9 months, you have to be removed for cause. But it's not a mini trial or a name-clearing hearing in the sense that's contemplated by the ordinances. The authority still rests with the mayor. Thank you. So, in terms of what I do every day, today, I'll give you a short sort of peek into it. I began with a meeting over the RFP process for the water plant. We have a department head meeting after that, and then I had some internal meetings. I had 2 negotiation sessions with different bargaining units, worked on removing a litigation complaint against the police to federal court, also responding to another complaint, litigation complaint, prepared for this, drafted a policy on open meeting law changes relative to the executive order. You know, the work just, you know, we're a very busy place,
Keeps going. No.
so.
Councilor Thompson, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Solicitor Bridges, for your time tonight and the work you do for our city, and also for Councilor Farwell for bringing this matter to us. Now, all the points that Councilor Farwell brought up, I think, are valid. But unfortunately, the ordinance before us today doesn't address all those issues. The ordinance today only addresses the qualifications and the residency issue, and I think this council or this ordinance committee should seriously look at those other issues outside of this ordinance regarding contract. Now, as you said, I believe you said you're the only department head who serves strictly at the pleasure of the mayor. And if this city, and through our actions over the last year, want to move towards more of a professional law firm type of environment for our city, then I think we need to protect ourselves or the law department through any undue influence, political influence that may come from the mayor's office, from this board, from department heads. And obviously, I'm not making any accusations that any of that is happening. I'm just saying, as we discuss looking into the future, I think this body should take a look at removing some of that discretionary authority from the mayor, make this a contract position for a 2-3-year term or something to that effect, so that you know, there can be some independence between our city solicitor and our mayor's office. Now, you state in your comments that potentially this can be done without a home rule petition to change the statute. You're saying that potentially this can be done through some other bargaining type of process?
I'm just offering that the statute there's a statute on the position. So not just a charter provision or a revised ordinance. But that I don't view the statute as restrictive in any way other than the sense that the solicitor is not confirmed or removed by the council. That is what the law says.
So what about the charter? What's the charter say as to this position?
Same thing. It's word for word the exact same thing. The charter.
So the charter you don't believe is restrictive as well?
It's the exact same words. So I think what the charter, it's section 60 of the revised ordinances. And it's word for word, section 60 of chapter 43. So I think that it's restrictive only in the sense that the solicitor, these are the words on the page. Upon the adoption of Plan B, all heads of departments and members of municipal boards, except the school committee, officials appointed by the governor, and assessors if elected by the people, shall be appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation by the council, but the city solicitor shall be appointed and may be removed by the mayor without confirmation by the council.
So the city solicitor is specifically pointed out, specifically addressed on the issue of hiring and removal.
Correct, yes.
So that would, if you're saying, so if we got into a contract, that potentially wouldn't conflict with the mayor's discretion there?
So I guess sort of these are my points, is that The discretion isn't taken up by the statute or by our local ordinances. The discretion lies, the discretion isn't sort of contemplated other than the city council's not involved in the hiring or firing. So, I don't think the council could force the mayor to employ the solicitor by contract. I think that that is within the mayor's decision to do so. But I don't think, maybe unlike prior administrations or maybe prior, councils, were under the impression that that was not a vehicle or an avenue that was available for employment. It is absolutely an avenue that's available for employment. I just read the law narrowly to mean a contract could not extend beyond the term of the mayor, based on, the city would then be holding itself out for damages over another administration, and I don't think I think that's against the intent of the statute.
Okay, understood. So if the administration chooses not to do that and the city council wanted to bring up the issue, it would require a charter change.
The section is in the revised ordinances, so it's not part of the charter. It's the revised ordinances of the city, section 60. And I think that the state law is the supreme authority on the subject matter. So the state law provides plenty of discretion for the executive office and not a lot of discretion for the legislative body over the subject matter of the solicitor.
So that,
In
and,
terms of employment.
okay, and forgive me, I'm not well versed in charter changes versus statutory change. So charter change, home rule, statutory change, just
That is
bring
the
this to
law.
our state delegation and ask them to make the change at their level.
That is the law.
Okay.
And our ordinances directly, or they specifically mirror the law.
Okay.
So there has been, this sort of thought that the solicitor serves at the pleasure of the mayor. And I would just like to state on the record that, I think Mayor Sullivan takes employment very seriously. And it's just not that simple, I guess, is really all. There is discretion over some protection for the position. But I think the discretion lies with the office of the executive.
Right, so if Mayor Sullivan said, thank you for your service, we'll no longer need that, he does that tomorrow, you have no recourse. Unless it's a civil rights violation of some sort.
Yeah, a hypothetical, probably not good, and I hope I never get fired, like we all do, but I don't have a claim to this job in the contract,
Right, but you stated that, and I'll end it here, I don't want to keep going, but you stated that you represent the city.
I do.
Sometimes the mayor, potentially, and this is all hypothetical, may have other interests than what's best for the city, may be best for his or her political aspirations or political future, or maybe financial interests. It could happen.
Understood.
So if those conflict, and a city solicitor provides advice on what they believe is in the best interest of the city, the mayor at that point could say, thanks for your advice, see you later.
That is what's contemplated by the law.
And there's no recourse, there's no a redress from this council to prevent a city solicitor from being fired in that manner for that reason,
Well, there's
other than political pressure or something to that.
many variables to give sort of like a hypothetical on the situation, but I think what you're asking is, what's the council's authority over the position? The statute is very clear that the council doesn't have a role in the hiring or firing of the solicitor. You set the parameters of the job description, but also you've just very eloquently highlighted, the curiousness of the role. Because I do represent the city, but I could be let go on a whim because Mayor Sullivan certainly would not do this, but I wore the wrong color shirt. That is what is contemplated by the law for the position.
And your understanding of a professionally run law firm, do you think that is, compatible with a professionally run law firm?
Job security, when you're providing difficult or unpalatable advice, I think is a necessary, is a necessary component of the work. I often say I'm glad, I'm not running for office. I have to make really difficult decisions all the time that, are very hard. And I have to do them sort of with just a hope that I'm going to be able to come to work tomorrow.
Right, and we should maybe try to remove that uncertainty.
I mean, I do my job, sort of without political influence, absolutely, but it is a curious position.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Thank you, Solicitor Bridges. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Monahan.
Good evening. He covered a lot of stuff, but the biggest one was it's not a charter change, but we really don't have a lot of power about changing even our own ordinances.
No, what Councilor Farwell presented was totally appropriate.
No, yes, but I mean, as far as if we wanted to make it a full-time job, a contract job, all these things, is what the form of government that we have, is that what basically says that it's at the mayor's purview who he wants for a lawyer in a Form B government?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's what we have.
Correct.
And there are other cities and towns that don't have that, but they have full-time lawyers as city solicitors?
A lot of other cities and towns do utilize a contract for
Contracts, okay.
for solicitors. They do. The ones that I've seen coincide with the term of the administration. No, I don't think mayors that utilize this, because they're few and far between the in-house counsels like me. A lot of smaller cities and towns utilize law firms, or somebody that works part-time and you call up when you have a legal problem. Not like the city of Brockton where the legal questions come in rapidly, and the issues just need to be dealt with. We're a large city, and we are, on the cusp of a lot of great things, so that requires input from legal. So there's not a lot of folks like out there like us, but the ones that do have contracts coincide with the term of the mayor.
Yeah, and I understand, because as a bigger city, obviously, like when we go from one city solicitor to the next, it's like everything they've been working on goes to somebody new, and then it's like you got to start over again, and you got to be up. They have to put you up to speed on it, and I understand that could be if we had somebody under a contract or whatever, it would be a smoother transition if we had to have one at all. But I know it's kind of crazy when we have to have somebody with your knowledge in there, understands everything, and all of a sudden you can be gone after a 2-year term.
I just want to interrupt for one quick second. Can you go a little bit closer to the microphone?
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you,
Sorry.
Attorney. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. Go
No,
ahead.
that's fine. Don't let it happen again. But anyway,
You all done now?
I should go on for 20 hours. No, it's just a tough change. But the ordinance we're working on today is basically requirements.
Yes, which is totally appropriate to be before you,
Right.
probably long overdue, and you help the administration in setting the parameters for, who should fill the role.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nacastro.
Good evening again, Councilor Bridges. I don't know how to insulate a city solicitor from the political realm, because you're selected by the person who wins the role of mayor
Right.
in a political election. I think it's one of those things. And while I am familiar with the Boston Law Department, the Newton Law Department, and with Taunton, for the most part, it works.
It does.
It does, yes. I think the most important thing is the trust and the similar ideas of the solicitor and the mayor. The mayor has to have someone in there he trusts.
I would agree.
Yes, and so I don't know how to address that, but I did want to ask, what's in front of us tonight?
Is, as Councilor Thompson pointed out, setting qualifications for the role.
Right, And that's a good idea.
I agree.
Yes. Is there anything you would add to this?
I do not think so, no. No, I do not think so. Other than, I think you already made the change about,
The BBO?
yes.
Yes, I'll get that.
No, nothing else that I would add.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chair.
welcome. You're welcome. Any, Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Bridges, so you said that you are the lawyer for the city.
I do.
So, I mean, we had this instance a couple years ago where the administration filed a lawsuit against half of the administration of the city. In that particular instance, how does that work? You are basically told by the administration to sue the other half of government.
I would have to stop you right there and say that, just in a simple sense, no one tells me who to sue or how to sue them. That is a legal strategy that's within the parameters of the solicitor, that's within my discretion.
Right, but what I'm saying, this is real life stuff that actually
is
happened to
real life.
us.
For
You know-
example, I'll give you a real life example. I don't have the PowerPoint, I wasn't here, power plant. So I can't speculate, nor would I, speculate on that or offer an opinion about something that has happened in the past. Police officers are a different example. The city is oftentimes confronted with the question of, do we defend them or not defend them? Do we ask them to get their outside counsel? Does it conflict with city? So those are the types of things that I look at when I make the statement, I defend the city. And oftentimes, even in corporations, as a parallel example, interests can diverge, but you have a common goal. In a corporation, it's your bottom line, probably. It's not here. But as a parallel example, interests diverge sometimes. And my job is to protect the interests of the city
As a whole,
as a whole.
which includes the city council as well.
Yes, I have represented the city council in litigation in my role as an assistant and currently.
But at the same time, we basically have no say whether or not you're hired or not hired.
Correct.
So and I brought this up when we first discussed this order on the council itself. I mean, we're basically looking at the administration, looking at the mayor, and I'm not saying, again, to borrow what Councilor Thompson was saying, in terms of not pointing a finger at anybody that's presently holding the position, but the fact that a mayor can come in from whatever he or she comes from and decides that, you know what, I know that you've got an ordinance in the book that says, you have to have 5 years worth of experience, you got to do this, you got to do this, but he or she says, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hire a friend of mine to become the lawyer for the city. And in reality, we're basically leaving it up to the person whose goodwill or at least, courteously follows what we're putting down in black and white, not necessarily to hold them accountable for this. I mean, my whole thing is, how do I make sure that, or I or anybody up here makes sure that the next person that comes in 5 years, 10 years from now decides to hire a solicitor based on the criteria that we have established here, and not because he or she's a friend of the person who's elected to the corner office?
I think the short answer is there need to be a change to Chapter 43, Section 60 of the state law. The state law specifically says the solicitor shall be appointed and may be removed by the mayor without confirmation by the city council. So the authority over the employment is with the administration. And I think that these ordinances, or the ordinance change, is a great idea because it sets the expectation and the policy of the council in what you expect the administration, to utilize. But I also think that the administration has to be trusted to use their best judgment also, He or she ran for that office with the intent to represent the city and knowing what that job comes with. So the folks that they select to work on their team, I think, we have to give deference to them and their abilities and credibilities. That being said, all of the items that are contained within the ordinance change seem to me as though they should be essential foundations of the job.
No, I don't disagree. I think, it makes sense for us to put in here, but my whole issue is what enforcement mechanisms do we have in terms of making sure that what's in here is enforced?
In this particular item, it's more of a suggestion.
That's right.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Councilors, any other thoughts, theories on this one? And Councilor Nicastro?
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion to amend this.
Okay.
I want to strike the reference to Bar Association, the end of the first sentence, and substitute for it Board of Bar Overseers.
These aren't the bouncers, right?
What?
These aren't bouncers that we're talking about, right? Bar overseers?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'll second that.
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion been made, and we're going to take out, so we're taking out the Massachusetts Bar Association, is that?
Well, we're going to leave, excuse me,
Okay,
we're going to leave in Massachusetts,
right.
and then we'll take out Bar Association and we'll insert Board of Bar Overseers.
So Massachusetts stays?
Yes,
Massachusetts
Board of
Board
Bar
of Bar
Overseers.
Overseers?
Yes.
Not the bouncers.
All right, motion's been made and second, any other amendments to it? No, just that one right now?
That's the only amendment.
You seconded?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Okay, so motion's been made and seconded to make that amendment? As amendment to that. All in favor of that one? Opposed? Anything else to?
I'll make a motion to approve or to recommend favorably as amended.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve as amended, to go back to the full city council. All in favor of that? Opposed? It goes back to the full city council as amended. Okay. We're going to move on to item number 2, councilors. And you have that, you should have that one in your paperwork. So, it's an ordinance, excuse me. Ordinance be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton as follows: that the City Council adopt the following amendment to the ordinance establishing licensing and regulations for adult use marijuana establishments. Section 1-0072A is amended by striking the entire sentence and inserting the following in its place. Priority applications review will be granted existing social equity participation or economic empowerment participant applicants for retail license. Social equity program participant means an individual who qualified to participate in the social equity program and is designated as a program participant by the Cannabis Control Commission. Economic empowerment participant means an individual who qualified to participate in the economic empowerment program and is designed as a program participant by the Cannabis Control Commission. I think I'm repeating myself over and over, but for a period of 3 years measured by the date at which a retail license becomes available in the City of Brockton, the City Council shall only review applications for a retail license for social equity participant or economic empowerment participant applicants. And we have that was brought before us by City Council at Large Tina Cardozo, and invited to speak as well as our attorney, Shannon Resnick. So, Councilor, good evening.
Good evening, councilors,
Good
members
evening.
of the committee. Thank you for hearing this and putting it on the agenda tonight. I know I was away
Welcome.
last month and couldn't be here.
You don't have to rub it in. You know that. Yeah,
Yes, I
thank you.
appreciate
Okay.
it. So I'm going to defer to Attorney Resnick to give you more information on this, but I do want to say that there were a couple members of the community that wanted to speak on this tonight who are subject matter experts who have participated in the social equity program, and I thought that that would have been nice for you all to hear from them as, you know, participants of that program. They have a lot of knowledge, given what we've been through this last year and not having a lot of information when we make these decisions. I thought it would have been nice, but I spoke to the chairman who stated that we couldn't have public here tonight, given the restrictions. So if it is the will of this body to entertain a postponement once again, to allow for these two young ladies to come in and present to you all, that's certainly something you can consider if you'd like to have more information and some subject matter expert opinions on this. But I will defer to Attorney Resnick for more information, and I thank you all, and I hope that you will consider this amendment and vote favorably on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
So just on the ordinance itself, I worked with Councilor Cardozo, and I actually drafted what's before you, so the language is legally approved by me. What it does is your existing licensing ordinance has a section about priority, and it designates that priority to existing RMDs. Your existing RMDs already have retail licenses, so that provision is kind of like a moot point at this point in time. So it would just take out your priority review that you had designated for retail applicants for existing RMD for retail side and put in this application or this substitution. The language itself actually comes directly for what Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission is doing on the delivery side. They are doing a 3-year period granting priority review to social economic and economic empowerment participants. It was challenged, and I believe that challenge was withdrawn. So that is going to stand on Friday. The CCC opened their delivery process, and from what I read, there's about 500 social economic and economic empowerment applicants that are going to have priority review in the state for delivery licenses. So the proposal would just provide what the state's doing as a priority review on the delivery side, to have that apply for licenses for retail. My only suggestion would be that when we drafted this, it was with the impression that something like this would be passed after all of your licenses were granted. And let's say you grant your 14 licenses, one of them, the business fails, they don't ever come into fruition, so you do have an extra license to give. That the applicant class that you would consider next, the priority review for a period of 3 years after that license is forfeited or returned to the city, would for 3 years be a review of social, economic, and economic empowerment applicants. Because you do have, I think, 2 or 3 outstanding licenses available, that would be my only suggestion on changing when the applicability of this applies. If the council wants to have it apply from the date of the ordinance, or from the date of the change, we would need to change it, but if you do want it to apply after your first 14 are granted, we'd need to change it as well. So I would just need to know from the council if this is going to be approved, at what point in this process you would want to see it implemented. Now, or after your 14 is granted and a license opens up. I will clarify, whether to do this or not, political decision, policy decision, not a legal concern. This requirement, this priority review for retail, is not part of the CCC's for retail side, but they have adopted it and have withheld a challenge on the delivery side. It is a policy consideration for the council.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just reading it, so with the language saying granting to existing social equity participants or the economic empowerment participants, Basically, all of our existing social equity and economic empowerment have already been granted their license. Now, I know there's the 14th that just got through zoning, and I'm sure will come before the city council soon enough. So, as you said, is this now a moot point?
So no. So what the existing means, you can strike out existing if you want. Existing, the language means it's a designation, social equity participant, economic empowerment, is a classification designated by the CCC. So we're adopting, if you, at this point, have that designation, you would have a priority. You could do it for future. There's nothing to say that it needs to be existing or future, because let's say a license becomes available in 5 years. And someone who didn't join this class today might be prevented from that priority review, and you might not want that. You might want it to be anyone who's ever had the designation. So you could strike that language. But that language, the existing part of it, was because that's the priority that the state was giving on the CC side for delivery.
Right,
They were granting it to existing statuses at this time because there's this whole group of applicants that are ready and able to go into business. They're required to go through training. They have their certification. So this was part of their policy decision.
Right. So, I mean, I remember when this matter first came before, or at least when we first discussed this ordinance. It was when we had 8 licenses. We felt that the social equity participants and economic empowerment participants were kind of getting the short shrift in that arrangement, and that if one did happen to open up, a new license open up, that we would prioritize the existing socioeconomic and economic empowerment participants so that they would have a fair shot at getting an RMD license. The fact that we open it up to 14 licenses, every one of them now has a shot to participate. Now we're kind of, if we continue with this line of thinking, we're tipping the scales a little bit, or when you say priority review, can you just, again, define priority review?
So the priority review in the delivery side means they're not going to consider or allow any applicant that does not have these designations. That is what the state adopted as their priority review on the delivery side. I think you have the opportunity to describe what you mean by priority review. Does that mean that your application gets heard by the council? I would assume that it does if you're putting a 3-year mark. That's what I mean by it.
Right. If we put a 3-year mark, then that means nobody, no non-social equity or economic empowerment could be heard in that 3-year?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought it says.
Okay.
And that's what is happening with the state on the delivery side.
Well, again, that seems like a moot point where we just issued all of our licenses. So it would be a 3-year, it's as measured as as becomes available. I apologize.
So that's why I mean, like, if you are, I would just need to know before you did anything, like what, if the council does want to move forward on establishing a priority review basis, do you want it to be today? I don't know if that's the best, because you have applicants that have gone through zoning that don't have the classification. So if you allowed it today, then they can't be heard for 3 years. Not sure that's what your intent is.
Right.
But if you want it to be for, like, let's say one of those 14, they fall off and one becomes available, we want to designate that priority review for a social equity or economic empowerment applicant. You could do that.
Now, what happens if the mayor doesn't grant an HCA to a social equity or economic empowerment?
Then you sit without a license application for 3 years. In my opinion, there's nothing we can do to force the mayor to grant an HCA.
Right. So basically, if he does not grant one to somebody in that category, the license stays open for 3 years.
It could, but I think then you can use your political power as a body to say that's a lost revenue source for the city. You can see what even the ones that you have open is generating, and the benefit that it does and the reliance that our financial officer is going to use when it comes budget time to put that money back into Brockton funds. So you would need to use your political will if that happened.
Right. So I guess my thoughts to this committee would be, when we first contemplated this ordinance, it was to level a playing field that we all saw unfair, that there were more licenses, more HCAs than licenses available, and the majority of those HCAs were to economic empowerment and social equity. We made the decision to level the playing field by increasing the number of licenses. So I believe what we were trying to accomplish with this ordinance was accomplished. To then, now further it, I think we throw the playing field, we unlevel it again, and as Attorney Resnick just stated, if the mayor chooses not to extend an HCA to a social equity or economic empowerment, we're left with a available license for a 3-year period that will not get issued or cannot be issued. So I guess ultimately, I think we've already achieved the goal of this ordinance through the expansion of our licenses, and that at this point, we should just allow the mayor to perform his executive duty, and then allow the council to review any application that comes before us. That's my thoughts on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor.
Should you ask permission from the chair?
Councilor Monahan?
Before you, 1 second. So, if no social equity applicant comes forward for 3 years, does this mean, and a license becomes available, are we held hostage with that license?
You go in and change your ordinance.
Huh?
You could always go in and change your ordinance. So like, let's say, practically speaking, you wait a year, you don't have an applicant, maybe there's this awesome opportunity for someone who doesn't have that class designation, you could change your ordinance.
Or we
Just
could
like you are establishing the 3 years. You
I
can
mean,
take
you
it
can
away.
have this and amended so that if a license becomes available and there are no social equity applicants, then you can go to the next level. I mean, because you're going to have to go back and change it, but I mean, you can probably do it now. If there are no social equity applicants within the 3 years, you want to give them priority, but if there's a license comes available and there's nobody there to take it, why should we have it sit there until somebody comes? It could be 3 years. I mean, probably won't.
It could, and if you see that, you have the opportunity to take that restriction out of the ordinance. That will allow you to then consider other applicant statuses.
Yeah.
In terms of whether or not there'll be interest, there were over 550 existing applicants for delivery.
That's delivery, but
Yeah.
this isn't delivery.
Yeah, but so I'm,
No, I get it.
you don't lose your right to change that 3-year period if you adopt it.
Well, I don't mind a 3-year. I'm just saying, at least if, I think it might go better that way, is if nobody takes the license, then we have to have another option to have somebody take it, maybe, so that we can use that license. We don't want to have that sitting there and we can't make money if there isn't anybody. I mean, we have somebody else that's willing to take it. So somehow or another, we could amend it to do that. I don't know. That's all I can think about it.
Okay. Did
No, you go
Councilor Cardoza, you had something you want to say? You go. Okay, I'll let you.
So this is why I offer that we have folks come in to discuss this further with you that are subject matter experts, and that's why I offer that we postpone this. But when I thought about putting this together with Attorney Resnick, I was thinking of exactly what you were referring to, a level playing field. And I think we need to offer some protections just in case one of those licenses do not come to fruition, that we prioritize social equity applicants, because the playing field is not leveled yet. It still is not level. So I think that that's my thought process, is that, say one of those applicants do not, then we don't make the same mistakes that we did in the past, where we gave 5 licenses to non-SE folks and didn't prioritize SE applicants. So that's what I was thinking when we wrote this, and Attorney Resnick can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just to allow, we can always change some of this, we can amend, we can change it later on, but I want to make sure that we protect those SE applicants that we have given licenses to, in that if something happens and they don't come to fruition, that we're not going backwards and giving those host agreements or licenses to non-SE applicants, if that makes sense to you guys.
Would a fair compromise, and potential, I'm just spitballing here, but if maybe if we could, if a current social equity or economic empowerment license becomes available, then we would prioritize that for another social equity or economic empowerment candidate, and you know, that way we're not losing ground. I mean, maybe that would be a compromise, because, you know, I just believe we do not have the ability to give out that HCA. If the mayor chooses not to give one to one of these candidates, then we hamstrung the city for 3 years to not avail itself of that license.
I don't think that that's what it's meant to do. And then also, does this apply to all license types? Because this could apply to deliveries as well, which is...
On delivery, it's not going to make a difference what you designate as your priority, because you're only going to see applicants with these designations over the course of the next 3 years, because they won't have the state approval. As written, this applies to retail licenses. You have a whole slew of other classes, your cultivation, your manufacturing, that doesn't have the priority. This would just make it as a retail component. But like Councilor Cardoza said, this was when we drafted it, it was really to respond to create opportunity if a license becomes available.
When we had 8.
If the 3-year hold-off ends up happening, you don't have any, you can drop that. You could shorten it. The 3 years, it mirrors the state use of 3 years in the delivery. Because originally, just for your background, the original proposal was a 2-year period of priority review, and the CCC actually extended it to a 3-year period to really prioritize this initiative.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Rodriguez, he isn't going to.
Okay.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes. Go ahead.
That would be me first, sir. Counselor, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I actually think, and I think you brought up the idea in terms of bringing some individuals to talk to us about this. This format is not the most appropriate place to do it, because this is a committee meeting, and usually people have to be, you know, experts to advise the body in terms of what to decide. I think the most appropriate thing would be for you to file a resolve and bring those individuals in to talk to us about this, because...
Not under an ordinance meeting.
No, just a general, file it with the council as a resolve to invite those individuals to come in in FinCom and talk to us about, all of us about this, and give their expertise and whatever else they need to be. But because if we basically go back and tweak this particular, let's say if we approve this ordinance as it is written, it basically, all it's doing is kind of adjusting something that we already took care of by the 14 places that are now fully licensed to operate in the city. So it actually, what it would do is, let's say one of those 14s become available, it would, basically kind of string the city in a position of holding on to a license for up to 3 years, where we might get another social equity applicant that comes in with all kinds of bells and whistles, but we cannot give that social equity license to another person because he or she is not an existing
No, but
license.
we can change that language.
I'm just saying, as it is right now,
Right.
it basically says if you had 5 social equity license seekers, it's just those 5 that you're dealing with. that you're holding on to those 5, although we gave 4 licenses out of the 5, so the one that's standing actually is holding his or her license, waiting for a license to become available. Now, who's to say that that 5th applicant is actually the best applicant to assume that particular position? Whereas you could actually have somebody that has more qualifications, more opportunities, more things to offer the city, but as it is written right now, we can't give that social applicant a license if one becomes available because they're not an existing
Right, but again, we can
applicant.
amend that and remove the existing.
And what it does, Tina, basically what this does, it just kind of focuses on bricks and mortar, storefronts, retail marijuana. It's not the general, and I feel that we need to make sure that the deliveries and all that other stuff, that we can kind of reverse what took place with retail.
Right.
And maybe focus on the social and the economic empowerment folks to make sure that they get the first dibs on this stuff. And I think the state basically has already dictated that's how it's going to go. So this has basically become somewhat mute in the sense that we don't need to change this because this is only going to be good for the possibly one more applicant that we have. That might not be the best, to be honest with you, the best social and economic empowerment applicant because it goes away from what we were trying to do,
Right.
to tell you the truth. Because those that we wanted to get licensed in the city got licensed. Got their license
So-
and they're moving forward with that stuff. So I think the best thing that we could probably do is probably table this and then file a resolve to bring those individuals in to talk to us about the next phase, which is technically delivery. Because to be honest with you, I drove by one of those facilities today that's open. They look like ghost towns, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I don't see them doing as well as you think that they're going to do. I honestly don't think that the city can support 14 of these establishments, even those that were licensed. I don't think they're fully going to
So
survive.
I think that our duty is just to put in language to protect people and to make sure we have a fair and equitable process. So however this committee wants to do that, I'm
Yeah.
fine with that, and with, the advice of Attorney Resnick. But I think that that's what we were thinking when we did this, is to make sure we've had a lot of issues with the process around equity, and we want to make sure that our ordinances reflect an equitable process.
Right, but we gotta
That's
take
all.
the next
We're not
phase of
here again, and these are kind of your words, to ensure the success. We want them all to be successful, but that's not what we're here to do. We're just here to make sure that our ordinances reflect a fair and equitable process. So that's all was my intent, but if it's the will of the committee to table, like I said, I would have preferred to have folks who are more expert in this area discuss this with you all.
They cannot come to the committee.
Right, I
this
get
committee,
that.
So it's got to go to the council.
Right, I get that. So I can certainly file a resolve, but again, that was our intent, was just to make sure that there was fairness in the process.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Second,
Motion's been made, and it has been seconded to table this matter.
on the motion?
On the, it's tabled, you can't talk on the motion.
Okay.
It's being
I
tabled.
didn't have the
Yeah.
chance to
It's not on the
speak.
motion.
So it's tabled.
Table, no discussion.
All in favor? Opposed? I'm sorry about that.
about it in the next one.
Yeah,
Now we can talk about it.
you can pull it off the table and then talk. All right, councilors, we have our last one, and we have number 4. Councilors, we have an ordinance amending revised ordinance of the City of Brockton, Chapter 6, Article 1, Section 6-2, compensation. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Brockton that Chapter 6, Article 1, Section 6-2 of the revised ordinance of the City of Brockton be amended to strike the following provision. The increase in the number of captains in the fire department shall be for a limited time only. The additional position for the position of an 18th captain, I believe I'm reading it right, as set forth in this amendment shall be eliminated, and the number of the captains allowed in the fire department shall revert back to 17 immediately upon vacancy occurring in said title for any reason, including but not limited to the termination, resignation, retirement, promotion, or any other separation from employment by any one of 18 captains of the fire department. The proposed amendment, if adopted, shall result in the ordinance reading as follows. The fire department shall consist of a fire chief and the following assistants, be 18 captains. It was sponsored by Council Ward 2 Monahan and the Council Ward 3 Dennis Aneri. And we have before us this evening, we have acting chief for this evening. We have Deputy Nardelli here with us, and we also have Officer William Hill, President of the Brockton Firefighters Local 144. Gentlemen, sorry. Just get used to it.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank God someone
you,
took their
councilors.
mask off when they talked, I can hear them.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you, councilors,
You're
for
welcome.
seeing us tonight. Again, my name is Brian Nardelli, Deputy Chief of the Brockton Fire Department. Currently the acting chief. The chief is away, so I'm here to speak on his behalf as well as the Brockton Fire Department. What you see before you was something that was enacted a few years back now, a couple of years, January of 19, if I'm not mistaken, when we increased that captain to 18. As that process continued, I think one of the things we noticed, not because of the pandemic, but in light of the pandemic, some of the things that I think we all kind of sometimes have to look at ourselves and say we can do better. One of those things was having that individual and being able to have that individual work and liaise with other city agencies. That being with BEMA, a number of different other, when we began to think about it, we began to see how years ago we had some major water main breaks in the Brown Crossing area in East Bridgewater that brings our main transmission lines into the city. At that time, the platoon deputy, the shift commander, was the one who actually had to deal with that. Well, he needs to stay in the city, but now he's trying to run out to make sure we're going to have water supply coming into the city. As we've seen now with being able to have this captain play other roles since it's been enacted and changed in the ordinance originally, we see now that that captain could have filled roles working per se with the DPW to help ensure water supply and work with water supply and get that information back to us so the shift commander wasn't playing two different roles and holding two different hats. Another example of that would have been, if you remember, a few years back, we had the incident at 1380 Main Street, B Bravo building. We had an incident where we had a water main break in the middle of the winter. Right. And those folks were without power, which was out without heat on some frigid cold days in the months of January, in February actually. Again, that was a major task for the Brockton Housing Authority to take on. That was a major task for, now BEMA had to work with getting heat in there. Our firefighting potential was diminished because now being able to get water into that building was diminished. I guess what I'm getting at, and I would be more than happy to take any questions that you have, this role has evolved for us. Again, I think during the pandemic, I think we all looked at ourselves and said, how can we handle things better? What can we do? With this captain's position, what we've been able to do is take that pandemic, which was very, very difficult time for a good year and still moving on. And we're able to see how that role helped in the pandemic role, but how we can move it to help in working with other city departments. And working with businesses. The Brockton Housing Authority, although they're a quasi-federal city agency, I think that help worked because it was able, they then had a point of contact to liaise with the fire department. Now, why the rank of a captain? I think the rank of a captain in the structure of that in the Brockton Fire Department is a person that can really make decisions. And that person will work directly with the command staff of the deputy chiefs to get that information to them and make those decisions. So if it's the will of this body, we would like to, as you see in this ordinance, continue to have that 18th captain to be able to work in a number of different roles that now we've been able to see.
Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Chief Nardelli.
Good evening,
Nice to
Counselor.
see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for your patience.
No, don't worry about it.
Refresh my memory. Why did we temporarily increase the number of captains to 18?
At the time, I was not in a role to really oversee that at the time, but at the time, we had a dead heat captain's role in the testing process to avoid at the time any potential, I think what I understood it to be liability on the city choosing one over the other, or this, that, the other thing. I think that was how that happened. And fortunately for us, we were able to see now the potential for that position. But now with, potential retirements moving forward over the next year, there's the potential if that sunsetted, we would lose that position, we would lose this ability now.
So if one person gets elevated to this permanent position, that means you'll need another firefighter?
Well, no, the way it would work is when that ordinance was put in, it was just for that single captain.
Yes.
So if a captain retired right now, that would not remove other positions, because it was just a promotion from within. So
Okay.
that would not bump that number. It would not take away, how I know what you're getting at. I think the best way to explain it is when one person moves on, the position for a firefighter would eventually be replaced, yes, because a body left, but the ranks within would not. It would just be that one captain's position.
And so this person will be your liaison with outside departments and agencies and such?
Yes, and that's been, that for unfortunately, the past year and a half now with the pandemic,
Out of
that has really
necessity.
worked out well. But again, what it allowed us to do is, post-pandemic, it opened our eyes to other things and other ways this position could be used.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Thompson?
Good evening.
So this is conditional on a retirement, termination, or resignation. But that condition has not yet occurred, right? So this is post-facto.
Yes. I guess we want to make sure, for lack of a better term, our ducks are in a row for when that does happen.
All set? Councilor Monahan?
Okay, and basically what you just described, that having this position made it easier for everybody else to do their jobs, but not taking away from any of their duties, and now you have somebody that can do what basically you needed another body to do without disrupting the rest of the department. So this has been it's just a win
Blessing.
for everybody. As Mayor Sullivan would say, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a good thing to do. And
So, Councilor, just to expand on that, the role of the platoon deputy that runs the shift is multitask, multifold. And sometimes when another crisis without protecting the residents from fire and whatever else in the city goes on, it may not be directly our crisis, but affects us if we
Right.
get another crisis. Now he's handling multiple roles, and that can become very difficult, especially when he's running other incidents at the same
Yeah,
time.
you're not taking somebody else away from
Exactly.
what they're dealing with. But,
Yes.
so I'd like to make a favorable recommendation.
I like the way you put it, win-win. You must have...
You like that?
I was
It's a
with the mayor,
win-win.
I was with the mayor this morning, and he indicated that, make sure, council, make sure you take
I
care of that.
married
It's a
a Brockton
win-win,
girl too,
you know what I
by the
mean?
way.
Win-win, he kept going, win-win. No pun intended, we left the win did, yeah.
Diligence?
Huh?
No due diligence?
Due diligence.
I
Well,
hate
motion
these
was
walls,
made.
by the way, we gotta get rid of this.
Motion?
Did you want
You
to
made
talk
a
on the
motion, yeah. Unless you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Councilor Rodriguez?
I was just,
Moises' turn.
I was just,
Motion's been
No,
made.
no,
Who
I was
seconded it?
saying, Moises,
seconded it?
Councilor Rodriguez wanted to speak, right?
yeah, but I'll second the motion and I'll go on the
On the
motion.
motion.
okay.
There you go.
And then we'll go back to Councilor
See
Nakash.
how that goes?
Sometimes.
Deputy Chief Hawaii. So for the folks that are watching us at home and that the role of a captain in the fire department is that of a lieutenant in the police department, basically.
That is correct, yes.
Correct. So what is the function of a captain in the, I mean, we know what the chief does, we know what the deputy chiefs basically are, division heads and stuff like that. What is the role of a captain in the fire department?
So, multifaceted. At a number of positions, they're going to operate on a piece of apparatus and have a crew with them, but they also have multitude of other tasks outside of, say, what a lieutenant in the fire department would do. They could be a company commander, which they are solely responsible for that piece of apparatus, even when other people are operating on it when they're home on their days off. Major maintenance, all those different things that needs to be done. They could also be the house captain that's in charge of the actual house. In that, all responsibility of that house, they need to report to public safety, other different functions. There are also captains that work in the bureaus that are the second command of the deputy chief in that division, and they would run that division in the absence of the deputy chief. In one of the cases which we're speaking of, that person is working in an administrative role, and they're working hand in hand with not only the administrative deputies, but also trying to assist in the platoon deputy in making and liaising and being a logistics type officer for this gentleman.
So actually, to make a long story short, in the sense, we currently have 17 plus 1 captains.
So we have 18, yes, so 17
Right,
plus
17
1.
plus 1. So what we're trying to do is basically officialize that plus 1 and make it 18 altogether.
That's correct, Counselor.
That's basically what we're trying to do here.
Just to memorialize and strike that, I don't know if it would be sunset language or whatever, however it's written in the ordinance.
Yeah, so we're not adding technically a captain. We're basically saying that plus 1 is now going to become part of the 17 and become 18, so just to basically, so that they're not in this position that they've been in since 2019.
Yes, correct. This has been in the budget and has been funded for 2 years. And I think, again, fortunately, but unfortunately for the circumstances, it's really opened our eyes in how we can use that position.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. No more questions.
That's it? Any other? All set?
You sure she doesn't want to?
Motion was made? In second, oh, I'm sorry. Did you wanted to talk on the motion?
Thank you so much.
Councilman Castro, I'm
I
sorry.
am
It
satisfied.
just reeled back in my mind, yeah.
Clearly.
Clearly. I don't know if it was clear or not, but it reeled back in my mind.
Take the vote, will you?
Are you gonna speak, or are you gonna just
We already made the motion, it's already been
second
seconded.
it? And you want to talk on the motion?
No, I'm all set.
Let's vote.
All set then, all in favor? Opposed? Goes back to the full city council in favor of recommendation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Councilors.
Deputy
Appreciate it.
Chief. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8.
Oh, we're done.
Number 8.
You're fresh.
I don't foresee anything other on our agenda, and we did pretty good working on everything we had. The only thing that got tabled was number 3, so we'll work on that when the time comes to, well, you and I will work on that, so we have to bring that back. Yeah, okay, whatever, right? Do I need a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? That concludes
Good night,
the ordinance
everyone.
meeting for this evening with the
Thank you.
city council. Wish you all a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm